Of course, the Proverbs, as we've discussed many times before, are written kind of in a poetic fashion. And in these Proverbs, we see this Hebrew form of poetry, where the same thing is stated really two different ways. It'll state it one way, and it'll turn around and show you the opposite side of that. And we see this all the way through the book of Proverbs. Some of them are really obvious. Some of them not quite so obvious. Some of them you really got to sit and chew on to try to understand the meaning behind it. So let's get started there in chapter 11, verse 1, where it says, "A false balance is an abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is his delight." Now, in olden days, not really all that many years ago, people depended on, the weights to tell them how much of something they were going to sell, and everybody depended on that individual who had the weights to be honest. And if they weren't honest, you were going to get cheated. And this talks to that. In our society, we're not using the weights so much. You're buying by weight, but you don't see the guy measuring it out. So you're depending on the guy that packaged it to have been using the proper kind of weights. But I think this extends far beyond that, and it extends into our daily lives. You've been cheated, and you know how that feels. You've had somebody sell you something or do something for you for pay and not quite deliver. How do you feel about that? Makes you angry, doesn't it? Ooh, how dare that person. They cheated me out of 50 cents on that deal. Well, how about in our daily life? What about at work? We're going to talk about giving the boss 8 hours work for 8 hours pay. And do you? And are there things that draw you away from actually producing what the boss is paying you to do? And when we do that, when we allow ourselves to become distracted at work and do other things, goof off a little bit or whatever, well, we're not being honest. And we're doing what it says here, we're using a false balance. Because the boss is expecting 8 hours, and we're giving him something a little less. And he doesn't know, and you're getting away with something, but God sees. And so God is telling us that a false balance, being dishonest on any level, is an abomination to him. And you can play with semantics all you want, but an abomination is not good. God's saying, I hate this kind of thing. And on the other side of that, a just weight is his delight. When we're honest, when we deal squarely with people, when we give people exactly what we said we'd give them, when we sell them something that is exactly what we said it was. I'm sure we've all experienced, as I said before, buying something you thought was one thing and then you get it and it's not quite that. You bought, you talked about buying and selling used cars. You can get took really badly selling a used car or buying a used car. Not that car salesmen are dishonest, Eric, that's what I want to talk about. What I'm talking about is myself, and I've sold vehicles. You know, when you sell a car, you pretty much gripping the wheels off of it, now you want to unload the thing. Well, we got to be careful because it's real easy to be a little bit dishonest, not being quite forthright. I had a teacher in school once that he was teaching a class on life skills. And he pretty much told us to be as dishonest as we can get away with. When you sell something, don't be stupid. Just promote it as good as it can possibly be. He sold a broken refrigerator for $300. He said if I had advertised it for $25, nobody would have bought it. So he advertised it for $300 and got all kinds of calls and sold to the first guy that came out. He says, I didn't lie to him. I told him it ran. I just didn't tell him how it ran. And he thought that was just great. Well, that's a disgrace. I sold a car. What was it, my car? I sold John's car. He drove the wheels off of it. It was what year was that? It was a Thunderbird. It was a cool-looking car. What year was that thing? I can't remember. An 87 Thunderbird. Looked really cool. Oh man, what a nightmare vehicle. And we held on to it until I couldn't stand it any longer. I had dumped money into the thing, and it was one thing after another. And I needed a heater core, which meant you tore the entire dash out and the steering column. And it had that problem. It had electrical problems. It had exhaust problems. It was a nightmare. So I parked it over there at the closed down market right down the street, put a sign on it, $600. Guy comes along and looks at it and calls me up, and I said, they want to take it for a drive. Okay, so we're driving down the road. He goes, so this is a good car. Well, and I gave him a list of what I knew was wrong with it. This is going out, and that's no good, and this no good, and that's no good. Going to take a lot of work. If you've got some mechanical skills, okay. So it's a good car. I told him the same thing. Well, it's got this wrong with it, it's got that wrong with it, it's got this. So he bought it. And but I did it with a clear car. I told him what was wrong. I felt like he was just taken by the looks of the car. It's kind of cool looking. But what a nightmare. But we can easily get caught up in it. Well, I got to unload this thing. The last thing I want to do is tell somebody what's wrong with it. They'll run away from it. But that's dishonest, isn't it? And you don't like being taken. And God doesn't like it when we're dishonest. And He's watching. A just weight is His delight. Honesty. That's what God is looking for. And verse 2, when pride comes, then comes dishonor. You know, it literally says, pride comes, then dishonor. And that's true. Think of pride. What does pride cause us to do? When I'm feeling that sense of pride, I'm not going to be looking for advice from somebody else. Pride is the thing that tells you that you've got all the answers. Pride is the thing that tells you that you're smarter than this guy you're dealing with. You understand things better than they do. Pride is the thing that tells you that you can do it on your own. Pride is the thing that keeps you from depending on God. Pride is the thing that keeps you from looking at other people as your equal. So pride is something that's going to cause you to make very bad decisions, really. When pride comes into play, dishonor is bound to follow. Pride comes before a fall. And there's sometimes where we feel like pride is justified. When you accomplish something really big, you accomplish something that's really great, you feel that pride swell up. Well, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but you might want to be careful of that. When you accomplish something no one else has accomplished, wow, that was great. Don't start viewing yourself as being better than other folks. That's where you're going to get into trouble. Pride, when that enters into the picture, dishonor is surely going to come. Pride is the thing that's going to keep you from considering God's Word and looking at the other individual as somebody of equal honor. But it says, with the humble is wisdom. Humility of mind, just the opposite of arrogance, is what God is looking for. You know, somebody that's got humility of mind is somebody that can look at other people, no matter what their education level, no matter what their level in society is, no matter what their family background is, and see somebody of equal value. They respect that that person has value, not just in God's eyes, but in your eyes. You don't consider yourself as better than them. Just because you have more intelligence than someone, well, where'd you get that intelligence? God gave it to you. Just because you have a better family background than they do, why is that? Is that from your doing? Well, no. It's really the luck of the draw, isn't it? We have no reason to be looking down on each other. And that's what pride does. The humble person is somebody that's operating on wisdom. Verse 3, the integrity of the upright will guide them, but the crookedness of the treacherous will destroy them. And here again, we see how these proverbs will explain themselves if you look at both sides of it. The integrity of the upright will guide them. You know, integrity is that thing that tells you to do the right thing when no one's looking. So you're in a situation, you're wondering, well, what should I do here? There's no one that's going to see either way, but you're trying to make a decision. How am I going to deal with this situation? And the integrity will tell you, well, what is the right thing to do? And you'll figure out what the right thing is to do, and you'll do that. And so integrity, the integrity of the upright is what guides them. On the other hand, the crookedness of the treacherous will destroy them. The treacherous are not looking for what is the right thing to do. They're trying to gain some kind of wrong advantage. And so their treachery will catch up to them. You know, it's you're going to sow, or you're going to reap exactly what you sow. Verse 4, riches do not profit in the day of wrath, but righteousness delivers from death. You know, there is a day of wrath in everyone's life, maybe several. The day of wrath, the day of judgment. This isn't talking about the end of time. Days of wrath come all through our lives, I suppose. The day of wrath. Here's a judgment from God, I would suppose is what it's getting at. Riches don't profit in the day of wrath. If God's judgment is coming down upon us, look at the children of Israel. When the Assyrians came down, it didn't matter how much money you had. They're going to take it and they're going to kill you. When the Babylonians came against Jerusalem, it didn't matter how much money you had. You're going to buy your way out of that. In Hitler's army, when they came storming through Poland and France, it didn't matter how much money you had. They're going to roll right over you. You're going to take it. In the day of wrath, God's judgment on this earth, you don't buy your way out of that. It doesn't matter how rich you are. You're going to be swept over from that. However, it says, but righteousness delivers from death. Righteousness is that bulwark. Righteousness is that wall that's around about you to protect you. Riches will not deliver you from God's wrath. Verse 5, the righteousness of the blameless will smooth his way, but the wicked will fall by his own wickedness. And again, another idea that you're going to reap what you sow. So the righteousness of the blameless smooths their way. Your life is easier when you choose to be righteous. When you choose to do the right thing, your life will be easier. It doesn't mean it'll be trouble-free. Of course not. But it'll be a whole lot easier when you choose to be righteous. Life will have fewer problems. And the problems you do have, you'll be able to figure a way through those problems. But on the other hand, the wicked, they fall by their own wickedness. You choose to be wicked, to get out of a certain situation, or to profit, it's going to come back on you. Verse 6, the righteousness of the upright will deliver them. Again, the same idea. But the treacherous will be caught by their own greed. You know, when you think about people who choose to do evil, what's behind it? Most of the time, it's money. You watch those TV shows that talk about, what Scar likes to watch, the ones about the killers, the real true life killers, and what they did. It shows how they got caught and brought to trial and all of that, and on and on, tells their whole life story and all that, the Ann Rule type of stuff. And so then, you know, I don't like to watch that, but she's there watching it, so I got to watch it. But you watch those shows, and here's these people that will murder their spouse or murder a family member, a close friend, or sometimes somebody that's a stranger, and what's behind it is always money. Kids killing parents to get the inheritance. Wives killing husbands to get the life insurance policy. There's always money attached. Almost to any evil thing that people do, there's money behind it. And they didn't start out looking to do something evil. They just got into a jam, and then, now I need to do something to get out of this jam, maintain my lifestyle, and, oh, wow, if I just bump this knucklehead off, I take this inheritance, and I'm delivered from this. And that's where it starts. You remember the bank robbery. That fella that robbed the bank, I don't know if he's robbing the other banks, but he's a known individual from Anacortes. He and the wife, they got themselves into financial trouble in real estate. They bought up some land, and it got subdivided, and then the housing market crashed, and they lost it all. Well, they had a lifestyle they wanted to maintain. They didn't want to lose all of that. So this fella, same age as me, decided, well, if I rob a bank, I can make a big bunch of cash, and I can deliver myself from this problem. Instead, he got a bunch of bullets. I don't know if he's out of the hospital yet. So what one sows, one reaps, and that greed, that desire to have the income, will bring you to no good end. In verse 7, when a wicked man dies, his expectation will perish.
And the hope of a strong man perishes. And this talking about, of course, end of life. What hope does the wicked have? When the wicked dies, all their dreams, all their hopes, all their expectations die with them. They're not going to have more life. They're gone. It's over. And the hope of strong men perishes. Even the strong are not going to get out of that. The strong, their dreams, they perish with them. The righteous, though, is delivered from trouble, but the wicked takes his place. Again, sowing or reaping what you sow. The righteous person delivers himself from trouble by their righteousness, but the wicked is right there to take their place. And whatever trouble the righteous could have entered into, they see, whoa, I don't want to get involved in that, because they understand what's right and wrong, and they don't want to do what's wrong. They pull away from that. The wicked is right there to step in and take their place and fall accordingly. And so all of these proverbs in this section are dealing with righteousness versus being wicked. This next group dealing with the same thing, but kind of on a different flavor there. They're talking about the tongue, talking about the mouth. And verse 9, with his mouth the godless man destroys his neighbor. Well, how does a godless man destroy his neighbor? With his mouth. Lying about him, slandering him, mocking him, all of those things. You're going to destroy his neighbor. But through knowledge the righteous will be delivered. Well, you got to chew on that one for a minute. Well, the righteous person being attacked by the godless neighbor who is telling lies about them, well, their knowledge, their understanding of God's word will help them deliver themselves out of the snare of this godless neighbor. Righteousness, again, will deliver you. In verse 10, when it goes well with the righteous, the city rejoices. Things go well for a person that does the right thing, that's a good neighbor, that is benefiting everyone around them. When they prosper, everyone rejoices. But when the wicked perish, they're also rejoicing. So when a good man has good things coming to him, the society, the neighborhood, oh, that's great. On the other hand, when a wicked person falls, they're going, yeah, that's great as well. So there's rejoicing on both ends of that. And verse 11, by the blessing of the upright, a city is exalted, but by the mouth of the wicked it is torn down. By the blessing, it says, by the blessing of the upright, a city is exalted. What are the upright doing about their city? What is the concern of the upright for the community? They're offering prayers on behalf of their community, on behalf of their city, on behalf of their country. We have prayers here in this congregation, praying for the nation, praying for our community. Those prayers matter. Those prayers have an effect. A righteous man is blessing the city, offering prayers to God, beseeching on behalf of their city, and God hears those prayers. On the other hand, the opposite of that, by the mouth of the wicked is torn down. How does that work? By their lies and their deceit and their scheming and all of those things. The city then declines. And so we can see in these Proverbs that being righteous is itself a blessing to those around you, to the city, to the society, to the nation even. And verse 12, 12 and 13 go together. Verse 12, he who despises his neighbor lacks sense. And to understand in what way he's saying despises, we have to read the rest of it. He who despises his neighbor lacks sense, but a man of understanding keeps silent. Silent about what? Well, let's read the next verse. It'll help us. He who goes about as a talebearer reveals secrets, but he who is trustworthy conceals a matter. So he's despising his neighbor in that here's a neighbor and something happens with that neighbor. Or the neighbor does something. And he sees the folly of his neighbor, or he sees this bad thing that happens to his neighbor, and instead of keeping it himself, he's going to go and spread this. One, doesn't like his neighbor. Maybe he's trying to get an advantage on his neighbor. But when you're a tale bearer, why are you bearing that tale? When you're not going to the neighbor and talking to them, when you're going to other people with a tale to tell about the neighbor, why are you doing that? What are you doing? Are you trying to help them? You're never trying to help them when you're talking to other people about your neighbor over there and what they did. There's never a good reason for that. That's always something that's going to be injurious. You want to gain an advantage, or you want to tear them down in some way in everyone else's eyes. When you do that, it says you lack sense. You despise your neighbor, you lack sense. When you fail to keep silent about some of those things, when you reveal secrets. However, if you're trustworthy, if you're really a friend, and you should be a friend of your neighbor, a neighbor should love their neighbor. That's our command, isn't it? To love our neighbor as ourselves. And if you do love your neighbor, you'll conceal the matter. You're not going to go about as a talebearer to make them look bad. In verse 14, where there is no guidance, people fail. But in an abundance of counselors, there's victory. Of course, there's one that's just so basic. You need an abundance of counselors to make good decisions. If you're buying a house, it's better to ask a lot of different people their opinion about what you're doing. If you're getting married, it's best to find a lot of people's advice about this marriage in order to make a good decision. Whatever those decisions in life are, the more counselors you have, the more people you have to get advice from, the better. Doesn't mean all their advice is going to be good. Doesn't mean you should follow all that advice. But if you don't ask anybody, if you get no guidance whatsoever, you're all on your own. Good luck to you. Good luck. You're going to fail in that if you don't seek out this advice. I think the same is true in Bible study. We have at our disposal what we call commentaries. People write books. They comment on what they've studied. Well, it helps us to look at what other people have figured out from their Bible study. They may have gotten it right, they may be completely wrong, but you have an abundance of those. It's really going to help you understand the Bible. Doesn't mean they're all right, because they certainly are, and some of them are just completely bonkers in their conclusions. But again, the principle holds true. If there's no guidance at all, people are going to fail. You need as many counselors as you can gather in. Verse 15, he who is a guarantor for a stranger will surely suffer for it. A guarantor is a cosigner. That's all that is. Somebody who cosigns on the loan says, okay, if they don't pay, I will. How many people got into trouble by cosigning a loan for somebody? Now, we might do it for our family. Maybe. And you might do it for a really, really good friend. You do it for a stranger, you're not doing something very smart. You're almost guaranteed to be left holding the bag. I remember my dad, like getting into these little business deals on the side from selling insurance. There's one character he fell in with. And this character, for whatever reason, couldn't secure the bank loan to buy some expensive word processing deal that back in the 70s cost a lot of money. And so he put his signature on there. Next thing you know, the guy's gone. He left town. There's dad left holding the bag. So a guarantor for a stranger is surely going to suffer for it. But he who hates being a guarantor is secure. If you just don't sign the paper, you're not going to be on the hook. So kids, if you come ask me to co-sign the loan, no, sorry. I'm just following God's advice. Verse 16, a gracious woman attains honor, and ruthless men attain riches. Well, now there's one that really sends your mind reeling when you look at that. How does that work? Well, let's consider this for a minute. A ruthless man attains riches. That's true. Your translation might say violent man or a strong man attains riches. That's true. Ruthless, strong men will attain riches. Doesn't mean they're going to hang on to them. Doesn't mean they're going to have a good end. But that's what they do. They attain riches. Well, on the other side of that, a gracious woman attains honor. Just as sure as a ruthless man is going to attain riches, a gracious woman attains honor. Through her gracious activities, her virtuous behavior and demeanor and so forth, she gains honor. That's what the result is. Just as a ruthless man collects riches. That's what a gracious woman collects. Verse 17, the merciful man does himself good, but the cruel man does himself harm. What do we think about that? If you extend mercy, and people begin to know you as a merciful person, how do they treat you back? With mercy. Your life's going to go a whole lot better by extending mercy to others. On the other hand, if you're a cruel person, if you're an exacting person, and you don't extend mercy, people aren't going to be merciful to you. When the Nazi regime fell, how merciful did people feel toward those Nazis? Not so much. Not so much. So it's just a truth in life, isn't it? Just a truth in life. The wicked, in verse 18, earns deceptive wages, that he who sows righteousness gets a true reward. Well, the wicked person going about life, they're attaining this wealth, but the wages they think they're earning are deceptive. The riches that they're attaining are deceptive. They're not going to be lasting, and they're going to be stripped of those things eventually. But on the other hand, if you're a righteous person, your reward is sure. The way you gain that, the way you gain your wealth by being righteous is more sure than it is for the wicked individual. And in the end, of course, you have eternity. There it is, another truth in life. Constantly is being said here that righteousness is something that is lasting. Righteousness will be peace and a good life and a prosperous life in this world and eternity to follow. He who is steadfast in righteousness attains to life, and he who pursues evil will bring about his own death. You engage yourself in righteousness, you're steadfast in it, well, you gain life, eternity. But the one that pursues evil, and it says he's pursuing it, he's staying after it, eventually he's going to die from it. And the perverse in heart are an abomination to the Lord, but the blameless in their walk are his delight. I'm talking to the heart, not just to what they say or what they do. The heart. The heart is where everything comes from. All of your actions, all of your words spring forth from your heart. A perverse in heart might be able to hide it, and they might be able to tell people that they're really an upright sort of a person. You look at the individual's life, and you see their actions, you know what's in their heart. You see someone's actions, you know what kind of heart they have. And it doesn't matter what they say. You know where those deeds came from. There was an individual that I knew very well, and another person that I knew and had a lot of respect for had run into them, and they thought, well, so-and-so, they really do have a good heart. I didn't say anything because I knew this guy. I knew he didn't have a good heart. I knew what all his actions were. He did perverse things. He did wrong things. He did evil things. And he could talk a good story, and he could sit there talking, you could feel for him, and you get you thinking, well, he really wants what's good. No, he doesn't. No, he doesn't. Not if you do evil. And so, I lost my place here. Down here, verse 20, the perverse in heart are an abomination to God, but the blameless, their walk, is his delight. The things that you do reveal the blamelessness in your heart. In verse 21, assuredly the evil man will not go unpunished, but the descendants of the righteous will be delivered. The evil man will not go unpunished. That is our word. That is our concern, isn't it? We're concerned about justice. This person just did me wrong. Well, relax. God will bring justice on him eventually. You don't have to go out and ensure justice. That's God's job. And he guarantees us the guilty will not go unpunished. The wicked will not go unpunished. They will be punished. And in like manner, the righteous, even their offspring, are going to be delivered. You know why? What is the righteous man doing in his family? Giving those children the right kind of upbringing to keep them from going down the pathway of wickedness. And so it just goes on from generation to generation on both sides of the coin. In verse 22, here's a really good one. Verse 22, as a ring of gold in a swine's snout, so is a beautiful woman who lacks discretion. Well, there's one that brings up a nice picture. A pig is not the place to be placing gold rings. I'm not sure if this is suggesting the ring that, we put rings in pigs' noses to keep them from rooting. And my uncles run a hog farm down in Arkansas, and they put a little band in there. They crimp that thing in there on their snout, and that keeps them from rooting and getting out of their pens. Well, I'm not sure that they were doing that way back then, but one thing they were doing, women put a ring of gold in their nose. That was considered beautiful. Well, now it is again. Here we go. It's all come full circle, hasn't it? It took several thousand years, but here we are. But in those days, a woman, as part of her adornment, might have a ring of gold in her nose. And so I think what we're seeing here, here's this pig. And you put a ring of gold in a pig's snout. How beautiful does that make that pig look? You look at that pig, oh, look at that. Isn't that a beautiful pig? Look at that ring of gold. You don't, do you? Well, there's a dirty, what is that in his nose? What idiot would put gold in a pig's nose? It's just completely inappropriate, isn't it? Well, in the same way, a beautiful woman who lacks discretion. Here's something of beauty. But without discretion, it just isn't right. Discretion. That thing that tells you when what you're about to do is not a good idea. I think a perfect picture of discretion is, or the lack of discretion, here's a kid on a skateboard. And here's a flight of cement stairs and a metal handrail. And this 10-year-old kid decides, you know what? I'm going to leap off of that stairway and land on the rail and ride it down and land on the cement down below. And it'll be okay. And he tries it, and he busts his face open. And he's laying there moaning and groaning, and his buddies are going, wow, that was awesome. Well, that's a lack of discretion, isn't it? Discretion is a thing that tells you to look at this and say, what's going to be the outcome of this? What might happen? And would it be worth it if it does? If I'm going to fall and bust my head open, is that worthwhile? Well, no. A woman who lacks discretion, a woman who does not act properly, who does not act virtuously, a woman who uses her beauty in ways that are not right. And when she does that, that beauty is wasted. The beauty is vain. The beauty it's like a gold ring in a pig's nose. Discretion, graciousness are what what make that beautiful woman really stand out in the eyes of God. Verse 23, the desire of the righteous is only good, and the expectation of the wicked is wrath. The desire of the righteous. Righteous people want good. That's all they want. They want to do good, they want to receive good, they want to see good in their community, they want good for their neighbor, they want good for their family. But the evil, on the other hand, all they can expect is wrath, because that's where they're headed, and they will receive it. There is, in verse 24, and here we have several that have to do with money. So in verse 24, there is one who scatters, and yet increases all the more. And there is one who withholds what is justly due, and yet it results only in want. So here's two individuals. One of them takes what they have and scatters it. The idea is that they are free with their money to those in need, or those that they owe money to, or those who are working for, whatever it is, they're scattering that wealth. And they will bring it back. It coincides with what we're taught in 2 Corinthians chapter 9. When Paul is admonishing the church to be liberal in their giving, he reminds them that God will repay somebody that's free with their money in that realm. Jesus told us that in Matthew chapter 6. Be free with the money that you've got. God's going to take care of you, and God rewards that sort of activity. On the other hand, here's the other guy, one who has money and owes somebody probably for the work that they've done Somebody is owed something that is justly due them, and yet they're still trying to hold that back. Here's a miserly kind of person. They've got the income, but they don't want to give it out. And here's somebody that they owe it to justly, and they're trying to figure out how to not pay them up. There's people like that. Well, that's the sort of person that's going to end up in want eventually. In verse 23, the generous man will be prosperous. He who withholds gain, the people will curse him, but a blessing will be on the head of him who sells. Here's verse 26. He who withholds grain, people will curse him. Now in their society, that agrarian society, here's somebody that has the fields. They bring the grain in, but he doesn't want to sell it just yet. He wants to hold on to it. Maybe he doesn't want to harvest it too soon. He's looking at making money out of this deal, so he kind of withholds. Well, people don't appreciate someone like that. But on the other hand, but blessing will be on the head of him who sells it, because they're in need of that grain. I missed one, didn't I? In verse 25, the generous man will be prosperous, but he who waters will himself be watered. I missed that one. And there, again, you reap what you sow. If you water, what does it mean? It doesn't mean he's pouring water on the ground. By water, we get the picture of when you water the ground when it's thirsty, it's such a blessing. If an individual is watering, they're giving something life-sustaining to people. They'll appreciate it. You water people, they're going to give you water back. If you're sharing your blessings, people will share them back. You get what you give, in other words. In verse 27, he who diligently seeks good seeks favor. But he who seeks evil, evil will come to him. You know how it mentions that over and over and over again? Diligently seeking good. On the other hand, seeking evil. Evil is going to find you. In verse 28, he who trusts in his riches will fail, but the righteous will flourish like the green leaf. Don't trust riches. Don't put your hopes in riches. They'll fail. If you put your hope in those riches delivering you, then you're gonna fail in that. Faith in God is what delivers individuals. In verse 29, he who troubles his own house will inherit wind, and the foolish will be servant to the wise-hearted. If you bring trouble in your own house, whether you're stingy in your own house, or whether you're abusive in your own house, you cause trouble within your own family, or with the servants that are living in your house, whatever it may be. You cause trouble in your own house, you're going to pay for it. You're going to inherit wind. It means you're not going to be prosperous. You're going to inherit nothing. You're going to come to naught. That's a foolish thing to do. Stir up strife in your own house. That individual inherits the wind. On the other hand, the foolish, or on the same token, the foolish become servant to the wise. And that's just another truism. Verse 30, the fruit of the righteous is a tree of life, and he who is wise wins souls. A righteous individual. They are righteous in their behavior, they're righteous in their speech, and other people benefit from that. And they'll have good advice to give others. They will have life-giving advice. Repent of those sins and come to God. He who wins souls is a wise individual. Who are we working for? God Almighty. What are we working for? Heaven itself. There's nothing more profitable an individual can do than to spend their time trying to win people to their God. And the last one for this chapter, verse 31, if the righteous will be rewarded in the earth, how much more the wicked and the sinner? I think it's a little misleading to say rewarded. Another way to say that is recompensed. If the righteous are going to be recompensed, how much more the evil person? In other words, the righteous person is going to be disciplined by God. If the righteous person stumbles and does evil, well, they're going to be recompensed for that activity. God chastises the son that he loves. And so if the righteous receive that recompense from God, how much more so the wicked and the sinner? I think we can relax about, oh, that guy, that dirty dog, he needs to get his just desserts. No, that's God's job. And He will deliver. You can count on it. If there's someone here that realizes their life is not in harmony with the will of God, and you want to do something about it, then we'll offer you this opportunity at this time.